ASEAN member states and all efforts that have been done to solve the issues of Myanmar. We have with us Dr. Teku Reza Shah, an international relations expert from Indonesia's Pajajaran University. Good evening, Pak Reza. Thank you for joining us. Now, what can we understand from Cambodian Hun Sen's official visit to Myanmar? As we know, he is also the current ASEAN chairman. How do you see this political move? Some criticize it will lead ASEAN to recognize the Myanmar junta. What's your take?
Well, in my opinion, firstly, this is a historic moment for Cambodia and for Myanmar, because Cambodia is replacing Brunei Darussalam. Brunei came into ASEAN on the 7th of January 1984, and today is the 7th of January 2022, meaning a new history after 30 years of Brunei into ASEAN. So this is something monumental. And also monumental for Myanmar, because Myanmar came into ASEAN on the 23rd of July 1997, or 25 years ago. But Cambodia is the latest one to come into ASEAN on the 30th of April 1999. So this is a very important day for Myanmar and also for Cambodia. And in this case, the representative of Cambodia, in this case Hun Sen, visit Myanmar, and he, with him, has a lot of hats with him. First, they are neighbors. Secondly, they are member of ASEAN. And in this case, Cambodia came later. Cambodia can put itself as the younger brother of Myanmar inside ASEAN. And also, they are brothers. They shared long border histories, and also they shared a long history under the French occupation. So I think that this visit could be very meaningful, especially as a younger brother. Cambodia could talk at the psychological level. They are latecomers inside ASEAN. They can talk in a new mood, talking about end of violence, restraint, constructive dialogue, and then Cambodia also proposed the next envoy comes from Cambodia itself, and also after that they will talk about the humanitarian aid. So I'm quite optimistic that this visit will enrich the diplomatic development of ASEAN as a regional institution.
But from an international relations point of view, do you view that ASEAN as an organization has been able to defend the best interests of all its members? And do you see that maybe there's polarization within the organization due to the Myanmar issue? Maybe some things that ASEAN needs to be more inclusive by involving and collaborating with other nations in solving the Myanmar issues? What do you think?
Well, there are various kind of opinion. Among others, this could mean a recognition of the military junta, one. But at the same time, Pak Jokowi ranked Hun Sen earlier on. It gives a symbolical meaning that Indonesia acknowledged your visit. But if we go back to the keyword of the polarization within ASEAN, polarization always already there. For example, there are already ASEAN 5, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, and the Philippines. Then ASEAN 6 with the incorporation of Brunei Darussalam. Then come ASEAN 7 with the incorporation of Vietnam. Then ASEAN 8 and 9, the incorporation of Laos and Myanmar, and the ASEAN 10 consists welcoming Cambodia. In this case, there is always polarization in the areas of maturity inside ASEAN. And then there is also polarization in the sense of different level of understanding the ASEAN Charter, ASEAN way, and also there is a different. We also witness different level of economic development, different level of political maturity inside ASEAN, and one of the critical way is the different way of perceiving how to see Myanmar inside ASEAN. And in this case, we have to acknowledge the fact that ASEAN 5 has a more independent foreign policy outlook, more independent foreign economic policies compared to countries in in the Indochina except Vietnam. The polarization among others are in the case of how to perceive the leadership role of China in the Indo-Pacific region. So there are various kind of polarization already.
Now, picking up on what Amanda asked, what about other nations outside of ASEAN regarding this Myanmar issues? Do you think ASEAN needs to embrace or be more in collaboration with other nations for this one?
In this case, I have witnessed the strong endorsement from the Indonesian president. Yeah, instructed the Indonesian foreign minister to utilize all mechanisms inside ASEAN and also mechanisms at the international level to engage Myanmar and to help to end the crisis happening in Myanmar. So if we see since January 2021. We have to acknowledge ASEAN kept talking about Myanmar, and then ASEAN involved itself into various kind of discussion with all ASEAN partners. Let's say, for example, the US, Russia, also China, Australia, and Japan, all provided stimulus for ASEAN to better engage Myanmar. But in this case, we have to acknowledge the fact that it is very difficult for the regime in Myanmar to stabilize itself, and also we have to acknowledge they need time to pursue a transition from and then also we have to acknowledge the fact that it is very hard for ASEAN to see the development inside Myanmar, and until today Myanmar has become the pebble in the shoes for ASEAN countries. There is a stuck, and I strongly believe that the arrival of Hun Sen to Myanmar will give a new light for ASEAN.
So let's talk about the most current tweet by our President Joko Widodo. He tweeted that he's had a phone call with Cambodia Prime Minister Hun Sen about the visit. They were discussing about development in Myanmar, and the president noted implementation of ASEAN consensus in bringing democracy back in the country. Now, what do you think we should do as a nation, Indonesia, in terms of diplomacy, as we are perceived to have engagement and a history of long experience to have dialogues, in holding dialogues with Myanmar?
In my opinion, elite in Myanmar, they have been considering Indonesia as their big brother because the way we handle democratic issues in Myanmar, we were quite elegant. If we witnessed the role of the past foreign ministers, Hassan Birayuda, and also the past role of Ali Alatas, and also Martin Natalegawa, and also now continued by Ibu Retno, we have been very consistent. And we always talk about the history of the Asia-Africa back to 1955. And then the way we engage Myanmar has been based on cultural engagement, not just political engagement. And in this case, Myanmar really understands that Indonesia is being honest. We are not pursuing power politics. We do not bring unnecessary baggages. For example, all approaches done by Indonesia is purely Indonesian. And then in this case, what we need to see is how the further development coming from Hun Sen visit, because next year would be Indonesia chairmanship inside ASEAN. So in this case, we need to appreciate the ongoing process, because when we talk about democracy in Southeast Asia, we have to acknowledge that at the moment Myanmar is in a transition, and for this purpose, Indonesia has been informing Myanmar that today the world has changed. The world has pursued for greater democratization, and Indonesia has experienced what Myanmar is experiencing at the moment. So in this case, there are roles to be played by Indonesia, especially that at the moment Indonesia is leading the G20. So in this case, Indonesia needs to utilize all of its diplomatic ammunitions. For example, we are the leading partner inside ASEAN, we are the leading partner inside APEC, leading partner inside Indo-Pacific, and not to mention organization of Islamic conferences and then non-aligned movement. So these are the ammunitions Indonesia needs to to deliver to Myanmar. So in this case, yeah, even though Hun Sen's visit doesn't show great implication, but Indonesia can benefit this in its leadership next year.
Right. We'll talk about Myanmar, Pak Reza. Violences occur so often there. Refugees flee away from the country. The problem is that Myanmar hides or they don't reveal data and information to the international community, such as public health response, economic response, and so forth. How do you think ASEAN could play a deeper role here to solve Myanmar's problems if there are no access to gain more data there?
Well, Myanmar has been inside ASEAN since the 23rd of July 1997. So we have been the family of Myanmar since the last 25 years. It is true that Myanmar has not revealed all of its information, but we are now living in the area of science and technology. If we cannot find the data with regards to what is happening in Myanmar, but now we are living in the era of information and technology, where sophisticated data can be processed, sophisticated data can be explored coming from international institutions, from the domestic messages. But in this case, countries inside ASEAN, they need to share the data so that they know exactly what is happening inside Myanmar. But the next question is, once we have the data, ASEAN are quite mature when it comes to data processing. Our level of technologies are there. And then in this case here, we need to process the data, and then link what Myanmar really needs from the 17 items coming from inside the Sustainable Development Goals. And SDGs, it's provide a neutral venue for us, for Myanmar and to open itself. So in this case, it is the job for the ASEAN countries to identify all items inside the 17 items of SDGs and to see what Myanmar has achieved and what Myanmar are yet to achieve. And in this case, it is the job for all ASEAN members, especially Cambodia this year and also Indonesia next year, to link the best practices from all over the world and link it to the need of Myanmar. For example, in the area of health, science, technology, education, sanitation, and also development in the coastal areas. So there are works to be done. We need to be optimistic that even though the data is not there, but further research should be done by countries inside ASEAN to help Myanmar.
Thank you, Pak Reza, for your insights. The Myanmar dynamic will definitely be something we observe for the foreseeable future. That was Teuku Reza Shah, international relations expert from Indonesia's Pajajaran University.